Hey, you made it. Whatever kind of day you dragged in behind you, you can set it down. Tonight you're not racing anything, you're just drifting. Picture first light over Sukhothai, mist thinning into peach, brick shapes rising gently, lotus ponds holding the sky like dark glass. Lotus leaves overlap like quiet shields, buds still closed, and the air smells of wet stone and green water plants. Birds test their voices, one note at a time. Your brain will try to stay alert, but you probably won't survive this without falling asleep halfway through. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and let me know how your day has really been, your worries, your exhaustion, or even a tiny joy that made you smile. I'm here to truly listen and offer the most sincere, heartfelt advice I can. Now turn off the lights. Take a deep, slow breath. Let your tiredness melt away, and gently close your eyes. Let's drift together into tonight's dreamlike lands. And tomorrow morning, if you still remember, send me a message and tell me what you dreamed. You arrive at Sukhothai as the sky is still deciding what color it wants to be. Dawn doesn't crash in here, it tiptoes. You feel it more than you see it, coolness easing off your skin, birds testing their voices one note at a time, the world turning the volume knob from night to morning with careful fingers. The first thing you notice is water. Not dramatic waves or loud rivers, just water sitting, waiting, reflecting. Wide moats and ponds wrap around the old city's bones, and lotus plants crowd the edges like a living border. Their stems are thin and stubborn, rising straight from the mud with the kind of confidence you wish you had before your first coffee. Leaves spread out flat, glossy where dew still clings. A few flowers are open already, pale pinks and soft whites lifting toward the light as if they'd been waiting all night for this exact minute. You walk slowly, because the place insists on it. The paths feel gently padded by history, packed earth, old bricks, a dusting of sand that softens your footsteps. Every so often, you pass a low wall, half crumbled and already warming in the early sun, and you can't quite tell if you're looking at a ruin or a sculpture made by time itself. It's all edges that have learned to be kind. There aren't crowds yet. There's care. A person in the distance moves along a walkway with a broom, pushing yesterday's leaves into a neat line. Another figure pauses by the water and adjusts something, flowers, maybe, or a small offering set on a ledge. Nobody performs for you. Nobody hurries. The work is quiet, almost tender, and you catch yourself lowering your own pace to match it. As you step deeper into the park, the ruins stop feeling like objects and start feeling like rooms. Not rooms with roofs, rooms made of space, light, and the way trees lean. Brick bases mark where pillars once stood. Doorways frame patches of sky. A broken staircase climbs to nowhere and still manages to look useful, like it's holding the memory of feet. You keep expecting the place to feel empty, but it doesn't. It feels full of pauses. A breeze moves across the ponds and wrinkles the reflections for a moment. Lotus leaves tremble, and water droplets slide, slow, heavy, down their waxy surfaces. You watch one drop fall, and the tiny ripple spreads outward in perfect circles until it dissolves into stillness again. It's a small lesson in how this landscape works. Everything happens, and then it settles. Without noticing, you start matching that rhythm. Your shoulders sink a little, Your jaw unclenches in a way you didn't realize it was clenched. Even your thoughts slow down, like they're wading through shallow water instead of sprinting over concrete. If you arrived carrying a pile of invisible tasks, the pile doesn't vanish, but the corners soften, the weight redistributes, and it stops cutting into you. Ahead, through a stand of trees, a larger structure rises, brick and stone layered into a steady silhouette. You don't approach it like you're checking an item off a list. You approach it like you're stepping closer to something sleeping, quietly, respectfully, with the calm that says you understand you're the visitor here. You pause again at the water's edge. Lotus pods tilt on their stems like little lanterns that forgot how to glow. Dragonflies skim the surface, quick and bright. And in that widening light, the ruins reveal their real magic, not spectacle, but presence. Sukhothai feels like it's breathing. Inhale, mist, water, leaves, brick. Exhale, birdsong, distant footsteps, the first warm touch of sun. You stand in the middle of that breath and let it move through you. You don't need every name and date right now. You just need to be here, steady and awake in a gentle way, as if your body remembers how to rest. And as you take your first slow steps along the lotus-lined path, you understand this is the beginning of a long, quiet walk, one that won't demand you prove anything at all. You keep moving, because the path is already doing the thinking for you. It runs as a low brick spine between water and water, a causeway that feels almost too simple to be clever, until you notice how everything here obeys it. Lotus ponds sit on either side like patient mirrors, and the ruins appear doubled, one version in sun-warmed brick, one version in dark, wavering reflection. Under your feet, the bricks are old and uneven, softened at the edges by rain and time. They hold a faint warmth even this early, like the ground is keeping a secret ember. When you step, there's a dry grit, then a smoother patch, then a shallow dip where moss has tried to stitch itself into the seams. You slow down without being told. It isn't fear of tripping exactly. It's the quiet recognition that haste is always the least graceful thing you can bring into a place like this. The water beside you is quiet but busy. Small ripples pass through the lotus leaves, lifting them, setting them down again. A leaf tilts, releasing a bead of dew that drops with a soft plop you almost miss. Something small flickers under the surface. Fish, maybe, or a turtle that has decided it has nothing to prove today. Water birds hover at the edges with legs thin as reeds and attention sharp as needles. Their reflections tremble whenever they shift. You breathe in, and the air tastes like damp brick and green water plants. When the breeze arrives, it cools the sweat you didn't notice gathering at the back of your neck, and it wrinkles the mirror of the pond so the reflected ruins blur into soft watercolor. Even the sky seems gentler when it's doubled. You watch a cloud pass overhead, then watch it pass again below your feet, and something in you relaxes at the idea that the world can repeat itself without hurrying. As you walk, the beauty starts revealing its scaffolding. This isn't just a park of pretty ponds, it's a system. Embankments rise in gentle arcs, holding water where it belongs. Narrow channels connect basins like veins, and you can sense how water is meant to be guided, released in one place, held in another, redirected when the season turns loud. Sukhothai sits in a landscape that can swing from thirsty to flooded, and the city answers with control that looks calm on the surface. Lotus plants soften the geometry so the engineering feels like nature. The path widens, and the water spreads out, and suddenly you're walking alongside something that feels like a moat rather than a pond. It's broad, almost lazy-looking, but it carries a quiet message: slow down. Water makes distance. Water buys time. It turns a straight approach into a long problem. And even now, centuries later, you respond to that instinctively. You stay on the raised brick line without thinking, because the alternative is soft ground, wet edges, and the mild indignity of slipping alone. You glance toward where the land rises slightly, and you can picture the old boundary lines, earthen ramparts faced with brick, gates that narrowed the world into a single opening. Trees and grass have softened the outlines, but the logic remains. The moats curve, the paths align, and the ruins still hold the idea of an inside and an outside. It's a gentle kind of order, the sort that protects without turning harsh. Even the spacing of the ponds feels deliberate, as if the city kept extra water close at hand. You notice, too, how certain pathways seem to aim toward water on purpose, as if important places wanted the comfort of reflections nearby. A shrine platform sits slightly higher, and from its edge you can see a pond laid out like a polished plate. A long straight walkway meets a curve of water exactly the way a sentence meets its period. The design keeps repeating a single quiet idea: hold what matters steady, and let everything else ripple. But the same water that protects also feeds, and you feel that double purpose everywhere. These basins are storage and supply. They cool the air. They give people a dependable place to draw from when the dry season tightens its grip. Beyond the city, water becomes fields and food. You can almost see it in your mind as a steady flow toward rice land, a promise kept through heat. Civilization, here, isn't only carved stone and sacred images. Sometimes it's simply water arriving when it's needed, in the right way. You pause on a small bridge, and the surface beneath you is darker, deeper. The reflection is more complete: sky, leaves, brick, and your own shape, stretched and softened. When the breeze passes, your outline breaks into ripples and reforms. It's oddly reassuring. You don't have to hold yourself so rigidly. Even your reflection can loosen and still remain. The light strengthens as you move on. Mist thins. Brick warms into orange and brown. Shadows tighten under ledges, and the ponds brighten until they look like sheets of metal flashing between lotus leaves. Somewhere behind you, a bird calls, and the sound crosses the water like a small stone skipping. And with every careful step along this brick spine, between water that can defend and water that can nourish, you start to understand the city's old design as a kind of kindness, steady, patient, quietly protective, like it's still keeping watch while you keep wandering. You drift toward the stucco smiles in the soft shade, because after all that water and lotus reflection, your eyes want something solid, something that holds the light instead of mirroring it. The path curves away from the ponds, and the air changes. It's still humid, still sweet with green growth, but now there's a faint chalkiness too, like sun-warmed limestone. Trees gather closer, their leaves knitting a canopy that filters the morning into thin ribbons. When you step under it, the heat drops a fraction, the way a hand lowers from your forehead after you've been squinting too long. Ahead, shapes appear: platforms, broken steps, brick bases, and then faces. Buddha faces that wait in the shade with that steady, half-lidded calm, the mouth resting in a curve that isn't quite a grin and isn't quite solemn either. It's the kind of expression that makes you feel slightly exposed, as if it can see the frantic little to-do list you tried to hide in your pocket. You move closer, and the surface tells its own story before any plaque ever could. Stucco, plaster laid over brick, looks smooth from a distance, like a single breath turned to stone. Up close, it's a landscape. Tiny pockmarks where rain has tapped it for centuries, fine hairline cracks like veins, places where the outer layer has flaked away to reveal a rougher undercoat, and beneath that the brick core, warm red-brown in the shade. Light changes everything. A stripe of sun slides through the leaves and lands across a cheek. Suddenly the face looks warmer, almost amused, like it's letting you in on a private joke about how seriously you take your own problems. A cloud passes, and the warmth drains away. The same features settle into something more distant. You realize the smile isn't fixed. It's a collaboration between sculpture and weather, between your angle and the hour. You keep circling slowly, because it's the only way to see it properly. From one side, the nose casts a long shadow that sharpens the profile. From another, the shadow softens and the face becomes rounder, gentler. The eyelids seem heavier when you stand low, lighter when you step back. You think you're studying the statue, but really you're watching how quickly your mind decides what it's seeing, then changes its mind again. A caretaker passes nearby, carrying a broom with bristles splayed like a fan. They sweep fallen leaves from the base in slow strokes, and the motion, push, gather, lift, feels like devotion without performance. Their presence anchors you. This isn't a trophy for tourists. It's something kept alive by routine. You start noticing details you might have missed if you were chasing spectacle. The long earlobes stretched in the old tradition, smooth as river stones. The subtle ridge at the crown, rising like a flame captured mid-flicker. The line of the brow, firm but not harsh. The way the lips meet, softly, decisively, like someone who has learned to stop arguing with reality. Along a nearby wall, fragments of decorative relief cling to the plaster, curling lotus motifs pressed into stucco, repeating petals as if the builders wanted the pond and the temple to speak the same language. The lotus keeps returning, of course, because it always does here, only now it climbs upward, turning water plant into pattern, into memory. Time has been busy on these surfaces. In the deeper shade, you catch a faint trace of incense, old smoke clinging to cool surfaces, or maybe just your imagination reaching for something ceremonial. You picture how these faces once looked fresher, brighter, perhaps touched with gold or paint that caught the sun like a held breath. Now the color is mostly gone, but the calm remains, which feels like the better deal. Rain has smoothed some areas, roughened others. Heat has expanded and contracted the layers until they've learned to crack in fine, predictable lines. In places, like in dust the stucco with pale green freckles. The effect isn't decay so much as seasoning, like the world has been slowly rubbing the statues with wind and sun, making them more themselves. You think about hands. Not just the hands that made the stucco, mixing lime, sand, and water, pressing it over brick, smoothing it while it was still soft, but the hands that have hovered near it ever since. Pilgrims' fingertips, careful and reverent. Workers' palms, steadying ladders during repairs. Even your own hand twitches once, almost lifting before you stop. You don't need to touch to feel the texture. Your eyes are already doing it, tracing every crack and softened edge. And still, it's the faces that hold you. They don't demand attention the way grand monuments do. They simply persist. They accept sunlight, accept rain, accept the slow grit of dust. They accept that the lotus ponds behind you will keep reflecting the sky, and that you will keep arriving with a buzzing mind, hoping the quiet will rub off. You take a slow step back, and the whole scene settles into balance. Brick base, pale stucco, green canopy, a thin slice of blue sky. The smile, whatever it truly is, lands in your chest like a small weight that calms rather than burdens. You feel, absurdly, like you're being taught how to rest. And as you leave the shade and rejoin the path, the lotus water flashes again through the trees, reminding you that this place has two kinds of peace: the mirror-smooth kind you walk beside, and the steady, weathered kind that looks back at you and doesn't blink. You leave the stucco smiles behind, and the shade deepens as the forest temple paths take over. They don't bother with straight lines. They curve around thick trunks, skirt low brick remnants, and narrow into packed earth that feels cool through your soles. The air changes too: wet leaves, damp wood, a faint sweetness from something flowering out of sight. Even the sounds soften, fewer open water calls, more cicadas, more rustling palms, more small movements that make you walk as if you're carrying a bowl of water you don't want to spill. A bell breathes somewhere ahead. It isn't a sharp clang or a performance. It's a low, rounded note that swells and fades like a long exhale. The sound lands in your ribs and tells your nervous system to stop gripping. You keep walking as if you're not following it, which is charming, because the bell has already filed you under visitor, quietly curious, probably harmless. The path opens into a clearing where sunlight drips through leaves in thin ribbons. Wooden buildings sit low and calm, their rooflines modest, their edges softened by shade. A simple walkway runs across the ground, and a few steps lead up to a sheltered area where offerings are kept neat and dry. Everything feels arranged to cooperate with the forest rather than fight it. You don't arrive like you own the place. You arrive like you're borrowing the piece for a while, and the place makes room. You notice the locals first as motion. Saffron and earth tones move through green. A novice monk crosses the walkway carrying folded cloth. A caretaker sweeps in slow strokes. Push, gather, lift, reset. Another figure kneels by a low platform, adjusting small offerings, flowers placed neatly, incense set where it won't topple, a bowl positioned with quiet care. No one rushes. No one stares. The morning is working, but it's working gently. You hover at the edge, polite and slightly terrified of doing something loudly wrong, like stepping on the one sacred spot everyone has avoided for centuries. The forest watches you with neutral patience, the way old trees watch everything, without judgment, but with excellent memory. Then a novice glances your way, calm, quick, and gives a small tilt of the head toward the swept walkway. It's an invitation without words, and your body understands immediately. Simple instructions feel like mercy. A broom rests against a post as if it has been left there on purpose. You pick it up and let the bristles whisper over the ground. Leaves slide into small piles. Dust lifts in a thin sunbeam and settles again. Sweeping turns out to be strangely intimate. You learn where brick becomes earth, where roots push up like knuckles, where yesterday's rain left darker patches that still cool your palm when you pass over them. The work isn't dramatic, which is probably disappointing to the part of you that wanted a heroic moment, but the place prefers small, steady effort. Another task appears, again without anyone needing to explain it. A bucket sits beside a water jar. A caretaker lifts, carries, returns, repeats. You take your turn because you're already inside the rhythm now. The bucket is heavier than you expect, mostly because water refuses to stay still. It sloshes, shifts, tries to teach you humility in the least theatrical way possible. You slow your steps, adjust your grip, and after a few wobbly moments you find the pace that keeps the surface calm. The water settles when you settle, and you feel quietly ridiculous for being surprised by that. Carrying water sharpens your attention in the nicest way. You notice the smell of wood, faint smoke and resin. Incense lingers in shaded corners, thin and clean, more like a memory than a cloud. Somewhere, embers glow quietly in a small brazier without flaring up, just holding warmth the way old brick holds dawn. Under a roof, a smaller Buddha image sits back from the light, its expression gentle, less monumental than the stucco faces, more immediate because it shares the same shade you're standing in. You think again of the lotus ponds outside the trees, and how calm is often just good balance. The routine continues around you like a silent choreography. Novices pass with bowls and folded cloth. Caretakers sweep, wipe, lift, set down. You start anticipating others without being asked, the way people do in a quiet kitchen. Step aside early, keep your hands close, avoid sudden gestures. Your mind, which loves to narrate and argue, runs out of things to say. Time slides. Light shifts under leaves. Your leaf piles disappear as someone gathers them away. A wick is adjusted in a lantern niche, because even shade needs a little guidance when the light moves. When you set the broom back where you found it, your hands feel pleasantly tired, the kind of tired that doesn't demand anything from you afterward. The bell breathes again, low, rounded, forgiving, and your breathing matches it without effort. Down the path, the forest corridor leads you outward, toward a wider world that's waking up with different kinds of work. Between the trees you catch the first hints of food on the air, warm rice, grilled herbs, something sweet in the distance, like the day is quietly preparing to feed you next. You follow that hint of food on the air without question, without hurry, simply letting your feet accept the invitation. The forest path loosens its grip, trees thinning until the light opens up again, and with it comes the practical music of morning, baskets settling, metal clinking, a knife tapping a board in a steady rhythm. Behind you, the temple shade holds its broom whisper quiet. In front of you, the day speaks in ordinary syllables, buying, weighing, wrapping, carrying. You keep your pace slow anyway, still tuned to the bell's long exhale, and that turns out to be the correct speed for a market. Markets don't reward rushing. They reward attention. Stalls gather under patched awnings and leafy trees. Herbs sit in shallow tubs, rinsed so green they look unreal. Chilies shine, bananas arc in heavy clusters, and rice bags stack like tidy bricks, fitting here, where even the city's old bones are brick. A few locals ease you into the flow without touching you, guiding you by proximity, stepping aside so you step aside, slowing so you slow, pausing so you pause. Nobody asks you to prove you belong. They simply make space until you stop taking up too much of it. Your eyes keep landing on offerings. People prepare small bundles meant for somewhere else. Flowers wrapped in leaves, incense tucked into paper, portions of food tied with string. The market is not only feeding bodies, it is supplying the day's quiet obligations. You recognize the shapes from the temple clearing, the same careful neatness, the same idea that devotion can be practical and repeatable. Lotus buds sit in a mound near the walkway, petals closed tight like folded hands. They are cool and heavy with pond water. A woman sorts them by size, turning each bud once, checking for bruising, setting it down again. The motion is so calm it drains urgency from the air. You think of the lotus ponds at dawn, leaves holding dew like small moons, and you feel the continuity: water, flower, hand, offering, return. Then sticky rice announces itself with steam. A woven basket opens, warm breath spilling out, and the smell is simple and persuasive: grain, heat, a faint sweetness of starch. Hands pinch off portions, press them into compact shapes, and tuck them into leaf packets. The rice looks humble, but it carries authority. It is the food that insists you slow down enough to notice your own hunger. You take a portion into your hands, warm through the leaf, slightly sticky at the edges, and you learn a lesson about patience you can actually chew. Sticky rice requires commitment. You can't nibble it like a distracted bird. It asks you to hold, to press, to take your time. Your mouth fills with warmth, your body believes in breakfast again, and your mind stops pretending it can run forever on caffeine and stubbornness. Around you, the market unfolds in small, precise motions. Banana leaves fold into tight triangles. Skewers turn over coals, sending up a soft scent of char and sweet glaze. Someone wipes a counter, again and again, as if cleanliness is part of the prayer. The repetition echoes the temple, sweeping, gathering, setting things right without making a show of it. Near the edge, clay cups wait for a dark, roasted drink poured with steady wrists. You sip, and it doesn't jolt you awake. It warms you into being present. That seems to be the local specialty. Nothing shouts, everything steadies. People move through the aisles like water in a channel, quick when there is space, soft when there isn't. A child darts forward, then slows as an elder's hand lifts in a quiet redirect. You nearly bump a basket once, and the person carrying it shifts with practiced grace that saves you from wearing the day's groceries. You catch yourself holding your breath, then let it go. The old bucket lesson returns, friendly and firm. When you move too fast, everything sloshes. When you move gently, the surface stays calm. Small shrines tuck into corners near the stalls, simple platforms with flowers and incense, sometimes a small image sheltered under tin. People pause as they pass, not with theatrical bows, but with quick, sincere attention that takes less than a breath. The gesture is so common it becomes part of walking. Devotion isn't a separate activity, it is threaded through errands. Your guides steer you toward a quieter edge where offerings are assembled with particular care. Lotus buds paired with candles, incense bundled with folded paper, rice and fruit placed in balanced combinations. Someone checks each item, adjusts the symmetry, reties a knot, smooths a leaf. It isn't perfection for show, it is respect made visible. You remember how the stucco Buddha smiles change with shifting light, and you understand another version of the same truth. Meaning often lives in small adjustments, quietly done. When you finally drift away from the stalls, you carry more than food. You carry the market's rhythm, steady wrists, patient fingers, careful bundles. Even your breathing follows along. Your footsteps fall back into that calm cadence again, like sweeping, like pouring, like water settling in a bucket. And somewhere ahead, beyond the bright human noise, The ruins and the forest wait with the same unhurried breath, ready to take you back in. You re-enter the trees with the market's warmth still in your hands and the temple's quiet still in your ribs. The path narrows, and the forest closes around you again, leaf by leaf, as if it has been waiting for you to step back into its shade so it can resume its favorite hobby, being completely unimpressed by your sense of direction. At first, everything feels easy. Packed earth, exposed roots like knuckles, fallen leaves that whisper when you step. The air is cooler here, damp with bark and old rain, and light filters down in soft strips that make dust look like slow glitter. You keep the careful pace you learned while carrying that sloshing bucket, because the forest follows the same rule. If you rush, you spill your calm everywhere. You pass small brick remnants half swallowed by moss, the kind you can miss if you blink. A tree leans over the trail like a patient guard. Palms lift their fronds like quiet hands. You tell yourself you'll remember these shapes. You always tell yourself that, and your brain always nods like a liar. The bell grows faint, then disappears, and cicadas take over, one steady electric shimmer that makes time feel thicker. You keep walking because the path keeps walking. That's the oldest, laziest agreement on earth, and you sign it without reading the terms. The trouble begins politely. A gentle turn, nothing dramatic, and then a fork appears. Two narrow trails, both worn, both plausible, both equally convinced they are the correct option. You choose the left one because your body thinks it recognizes a curve in the roots. That confidence lasts a full 8 seconds, which is frankly impressive. The left trail dips. Ferns thicken. The air becomes still, like the forest is holding its breath. You look for reassurance, a shrine niche, a familiar brick edge, even a scuff in the dirt that says, yes, humans use this. There are footmarks, but they could belong to anyone, from any day, including a person who also got lost and circled until they became spiritually enlightened through mild annoyance. You stop and listen. No bell. No market clink. Just cicadas and your own breath. You realize you've been using sound as your invisible map, and now the map has been folded away. You try to do the sensible thing. Forest paths loop, they reconnect. You turn back with purpose, slow steps, steady breathing, the same calm you used to keep water from sloshing. You walk until you expect to see the fork again. Instead, you meet another split you don't recognize, and for a moment your mind does that tiny, private stumble, the one where it tries to place a memory and finds only blank air. The forest hasn't changed much, which is exactly the problem. Trunks repeat the same brown-gray vocabulary. Leaves keep the same glossy green. The ground offers roots, damp earth, and zero helpful signage, because the trees did not hold a meeting about your convenience. You choose a path that feels slightly wider, and the light brightens ahead. Relief rises in you like warm tea, until you realize it's not a clearing, just a spill of sun through a break in the canopy. Past it, the trail divides again, as if the forest is kindly offering you more ways to be wrong. Your calm wobbles. Not panic, nothing cinematic, but a small tightening behind the ribs. The part of you that loves plans starts rummaging for control. You picture the open ponds outside the trees, the brick causeways, the easy logic of water and walls, and you feel a brief, embarrassing longing for straight lines. You attempt a clever trick. You shift a twig across one branch at the next fork, then flip a leaf so its pale underside shows. It feels satisfying for about 10 steps, until you notice the ground is basically a museum of twigs and leaves, and your system is the equivalent of whispering your name into the wind and expecting it to stay put. You pause again and look up. The canopy makes the sky a puzzle of tiny blue pieces. Sunlight scatters, bounces, softens. Even the sun seems to be napping in fragments, and you can't read direction from it with any real confidence. You turn slowly, trying to feel orientation in your body, north, south, anything. But your body is a dramatic creature, and it keeps insisting that uphill must mean better. So you follow a trail that slopes gently upward. The air shifts, and you catch the faintest hint of smoke and incense again, real this time, not imagined. Your shoulders loosen. You think you've rejoined the temple's outer paths. Then the trail ends at a low brick wall half collapsed, a dead end softened by vines. No walkway. No shrine. Just brick green, and the quiet certainty that you have, in fact, wandered off the polite route. You stand there and let the feeling settle properly. You are not in danger, but you are not oriented. The forest has forgotten you the way it forgets all visitors, by treating you as one more moving shadow under leaves. You turn back slowly, refusing to fight the place with frantic motion. You breathe the way you did under the stucco smiles, in, long and cool, out, soft and steady. You let your eyes soften, taking in texture instead of hunting for labels. Somewhere far off, a bell might be breathing again, or maybe that's just your mind offering comfort. Either way, you make a small decision that feels like actual wisdom. You will find your way back, but you will do it the forest's way, patiently, attentively, and without pretending you're in charge. You stand at that half-collapsed brick wall a little longer than you need to, because the forest has a talent for making a little longer feel reasonable. Vines hang in soft loops. Ants thread along a crack like they have appointments. Somewhere, a bird repeats the same 3 notes until it sounds less like music and more like a metronome for your breathing. You turn away from the wall and start walking back the way you came, but now you do it with your eyes open in a different way. Not scanning for a sign that doesn't exist. Not demanding a landmark to announce itself like an airport gate. You soften your focus, the way you did when the lotus pond broke your reflection into ripples and reformed it again. Your steps stay slow, because you already learned the bucket lesson: rush and everything sloshes. Move gently and the surface calms. The path you're on still looks like every other path. Roots, leaves, packed earth, the same green overhead, the same kind of shade that makes time feel thick. But you begin to notice the tiny differences, subtle bends, the way one tree leans while another stands straight, the way the ground changes texture where water once ran. You're not finding the exit yet. You're just reading what's already there, which is a quieter skill and, annoyingly, the correct one. A faint sound threads through the cicadas. Not the bell, at least not clearly. More like distant movement, a soft scrape, a rhythmic brush. Sweeping. The sound arrives and fades depending on how the wind turns, like the forest is deciding whether you've earned the hint. You follow it without making a scene about it. You walk as if you're still exploring on purpose, because pride is a fragile little animal and you're trying not to scare it. The trail curves, dips, and then, through a lattice of branches, you catch a flash of straightness, a line that isn't nature's favorite shape. A walkway. Brick edging. Something built by humans who also dislike being swallowed by trees. Relief comes, but it stays polite. You step closer and the built line becomes clearer. A narrow route kept clean, leaves pushed aside in careful arcs. Someone is here, near enough that the forest no longer feels indifferent, near enough that your ribs unclench. A figure moves between trunks, not in a hurry, not searching with frantic head turns, just moving with the steady purpose of someone who knows exactly where their feet belong. Another shape appears behind them carrying a bundle, maybe a broom, maybe folded cloth. Their calm is almost irritating, which is how you know it's useful. They notice you the way people notice a missing cup returned to a shelf, a small shift of attention, a quiet correction in the world. No alarm. No drama. The forest hasn't eaten you. It has merely misplaced you like a thought that wandered mid-sentence. One of them gestures, not a big wave, just a low motion that says this way. You step onto the maintained path, and immediately the ground feels different, firmer. Your body trusts it before your brain does. They lead you along the walkway without forcing speed. As you walk, they keep pointing out things you somehow didn't know you were allowed to use as guidance. A tall tree with a distinctive scar on its trunk, pale against dark bark, something lightning once signed. A cluster of palms where one frond always droops lower than the others like a sleepy eyebrow. A small brick remnant half buried but shaped in a way that repeats. An old corner, a neat right angle, unlike the random collapse you met at the dead end. Then sound comes back into the lesson. You hear it now, a bell, faint but steady, breathing from deeper within the temple grounds. You notice how the sound isn't constant. It strengthens when the path opens, weakens when the trees tighten. You realize you can walk toward a sound without chasing it, just by letting it confirm you're on a route that stays connected to human routine. They guide you past a tiny shrine niche tucked beside a trunk, easy to miss. But once you've seen it, it becomes a punctuation mark in the forest. A place where incense has left a thin stain on wood. A spot where the ground is slightly clearer, because people pause here, again and again, the same way they paused at the market shrines between errands. Devotion leaves footprints, and footprints are a form of map. And then they make you look up, because of course they do. Not at the canopy as green ceiling, but at the direction of light. One side of the trunks is brighter, warmed by the morning sun. Shadows fall in a consistent angle, even through leaves. It's not a perfect compass, but it's enough to tell you which way the day is leaning. You think of your earlier attempt to mark the trail with a twig and a flipped leaf. Cute idea, genuinely. But the forest produces twigs and leaves the way you produce intrusive thoughts, constantly, and with no respect for your organizational system. The locals' approach is different. They don't try to change the forest into a labeled diagram. They treat it like a living space with repeated cues: sound, light, shape, routine. Birds become part of it too. You notice how certain calls cluster nearer the water, and others sit deeper in shade. A sharper call echoes from open space. A softer, layered chorus lives under thick canopy. You begin to sort the forest by its own voices, the way you sorted the city by its water. As you walk, your panic never arrives, because you never invited it. Your breathing stays long and even. Your shoulders stay low. The stucco smiles come back to you in memory, not as a statue, but as a technique. Let the light change, let the feeling change, keep moving anyway. Your mind can wobble. Your feet can stay steady. The path bends, and suddenly the trees thin. Brightness spills in. Through the gap you see water again. One pond catching sky like polished metal, lotus leaves stacked in calm layers. Beyond that, a familiar brick line, straight and simple, like the city is saying, yes, you're back. No applause. Just orientation. You step off the forest path with a quieter confidence than you had before. Not the confidence of someone who conquered anything, please. More like the calm of someone who learned a practical trick. The world is readable if you stop demanding it speak your language. And as the bell breathes again behind you, faint but steady, you carry the leaf map lesson with you. Not a paper map, not a phone, not a heroic shortcut, just attention, layered and patient, like lotus leaves on still water. You let the forest release you back into open air, and the first thing you do, because you're learning, is stop trying to get somewhere. You step to the edge of a pond and give yourself permission to simply exist beside it, like a stone with no schedule. The water is thick with lotus life. Leaves overlap in broad circles, some flat as plates, some cupped to hold dew. Stems rise straight from mud you can't see, and a few blooms open in soft pink and pale cream while others stay folded tight. Everything looks arranged, but it's just repetition, season after season, until beauty starts to look inevitable. A breeze slides across the surface. A bead of water drops from a leaf. Ripples widen, meet, and fade. You watch and think, quietly, that your mind could do that too, if you stopped stirring it. The bricks along the edge are warm now, sun-fed, and they hold their heat the way the ruins hold time, without ceremony. Under the leaves, the pond turns dark and cool. Fish shadows flicker. A dragonfly schemes, vanishes, returns, like the air itself forgot it was solid. The lotus isn't just decoration here. You've already seen it everywhere, pressed into stucco patterns, bundled in market offerings, piled like delicate currency. Now, close enough to smell it, you understand why it keeps returning. The scent is clean and watery, and it makes the whole place feel tended, even when no one is trying to impress you. Across the pond, a small shrine platform sits slightly raised. Offerings line its edge, flowers neat, incense steady, a candle tucked from the breeze. You remember the temple sweeping, the bucket of water sloshing until you slowed down, and you recognize the same lesson. Steadiness is respect made visible. You watch how people approach the pond. They pause first, as if water has a boundary you can feel. When a lotus bud is taken, it's lifted carefully, checked for bruising, wrapped in leaves, and tied just tight enough to hold. The whole process is gentle, and it lands in you like an instruction. A small dust pushes through, playful and rude. The candle's flame wavers, and a corner of leaf wrapping lifts as if it wants to escape. Without thinking, you step closer and cup your hand to shield the light. The flame steadies. The leaf settles back down. No one makes a big deal of it, which is perfect, because your ego doesn't need more hobbies. Lotus teaches discipline disguised as beauty. It wilts if you're rough. It bruises if you're careless. It rewards patience, which is annoying, because patience is the one skill your nervous system keeps trying to outsource. The meaning arrives in layers, and none of them need a lecture. First, the image, a flower rising clean from mud, opening toward light. You've been the mud lately, tired, messy, overfull, yet here you are, still capable of noticing something soft. The lotus doesn't deny the mud exists. It simply refuses to stay down in it. Second, the rhythm. Buds close early, open as the light strengthens, fold again when the day softens. It's permission. Open when the world is bright enough. Close when it isn't. Rest without drama. You feel the idea settle into your shoulders like a hand lowering, gentle but firm. Then you notice the lotus isn't only metaphor. It's food and work and small comfort. Near the edge, someone rinses stems and snaps them clean, setting the pieces aside like pale green reeds. Lotus seeds sit in a shallow bowl, little white ovals that look plain until you remember they come from a flower that insists on beauty first. Leaves get used as wrapping, not for show, but because they keep things cool and neat. Even the pond itself is practical, water held close, shade cooled by surface, a quiet reserve that endures the dry heat without complaint. Third, the way lotus travels through Sukhothai like a calm signature. You saw petals pressed into stucco relief. You saw buds bundled with incense and candlelight. Here you see the original pattern those echoes come from: layered leaves, spaced blooms, steady stems. The city seems to borrow its balance from this water, and then return it in brick and plaster and routine. A memory slips in, your twig and flip leaf trail system, swallowed instantly by the forest's endless supply of twigs and leaves. The lotus is the opposite of that kind of control. It doesn't demand the world hold your signs. It becomes recognizable by being itself again and again. Pattern becomes guidance. Repetition becomes home. You sit on the low brick edge for a while and let your body settle into the warmth. The pond doesn't ask you to understand everything about Sukhothai. It just asks you to notice. Light on a leaf, a bloom holding itself open, water reflecting even when ripples interrupt it. Somewhere behind you, the forest murmurs with cicadas, and a faint bell breath seems to return at the edge of hearing, steady enough to calm you, distant enough to stay gentle. When you finally stand, your legs feel pleasantly heavy, like you've been resting rather than merely stopping. You step back onto the path with lotus leaves stacked beside you in calm layers, and you don't feel fixed. You feel steadier, which, honestly, is the only kind of miracle that ever lasts. You leave the lotus edge with that steadier feeling still sitting in your chest, and you follow a path that smells faintly of chalk and sun, stucco territory. The ruins here look calm from a distance, like they've accepted their age and decided to be elegant about it. Up close, you see what's really happening. They're being cared for, continuously, in small, patient acts that keep everything from sliding too far into silence. A low platform appears ahead with a Buddha image that still holds a soft, weathered smile. Not the big, dramatic kind of serenity, more the kind that says, yes, time is a lot, but you can breathe anyway. Near the base, you spot a patch of lighter color where old stucco has been reinforced, smoothed, and blended as neatly as someone can manage without erasing history. The repair doesn't scream, new. It whispers, still here. You notice the workers before you notice the tools, because their movement has the same calm choreography you saw in the temple clearing. No wasted gestures, no frantic energy. Someone kneels on a woven mat, sorting brushes and small metal trowels. Someone else carries a shallow basin that looks heavier than it should, because wet mixtures always lie about their weight until you lift them. Another person checks the surface of the statue, eyes moving slowly over cracks and softened edges the way your eyes did, only with the practical focus of someone who must actually do something about it. The smell shifts as you get closer. It's lime, damp sand, and warm brick, clean, mineral, a little sharp. You watch hands measure and mix with quiet precision. Water is added carefully, because too much turns the plaster lazy and weak, too little makes it crumble. The mixture is pressed and folded until it reaches that specific consistency that can cling without sagging. It's not dramatic, but it's exacting. The smallest imbalance here becomes a future crack, and everyone in this circle already knows how patient time can be about proving you wrong. You edge closer, staying out of the way, because you've learned that the fastest way to become a nuisance is to act like the main character. One worker smooths a small test patch onto a brick edge, then scrapes it back off, adjusts the mix, tries again. The gesture is gentle, almost affectionate, like the plaster is a living thing that needs coaxing rather than force. It reminds you of the sticky rice. The way it demanded you hold it properly, commit to the pace. This work has the same insistence. You can't rush it and still pretend it's care. On the surface of the Buddha image, cracks run like fine lines across a cheek and along the curve of a lip. None of them are catastrophic. They're the kind of damage that accumulates from heat expanding, rain cooling, wind drying, life, basically. But the workers treat those hairline cracks as if they matter deeply, because they do. One crack is a doorway for water. Water becomes expansion. Expansion becomes loss. The chain is quiet but ruthless. A brush taps lightly against the surface to remove dust. The sound is soft, dry, and oddly soothing, like someone brushing flour off a countertop, again and again, refusing to let small mess become big. A thin tool follows, pressing fresh plaster into a line where a crack has opened just enough to accept it. The motion is slow, press, smooth, feather the edge so it disappears into the older surface. You notice how they never erase the contours. They respect the face's shape, the subtle curve of a cheek, the softness at the corner of the mouth. Repair here isn't about making it perfect. It's about keeping the intention intact. You watch them match texture the way an artist matches color. Old stucco has a particular grain, worn by rain, softened by sun, lightly roughened by wind-blown dust. New plaster is too eager. It wants to be smooth. So they disturb it just enough, tapping, brushing, scraping in tiny patterns until it sits closer to the surrounding skin of the statue. It's almost funny, in a quiet way, how much effort goes into making something not stand out. You offer your hands when a basin needs shifting, and you're given a small task that feels like you've been admitted into the slow temple economy of usefulness. You carry water again, because of course you do, and the bucket lesson returns immediately. If you move too fast, it sloshes and punishes you with cold splashes against your shins. If you slow down, the surface calms, and the weight becomes manageable. You set the water down carefully near the mixing area, and you feel that tiny satisfaction of not making the day harder for anyone else. Nearby, relief patterns catch the light, lotus motifs pressed into stucco, repeating petals and curling stems. Some sections are intact, crisp enough to read. Others are softened, edges blurred. When the workers repair near these patterns, they don't flatten them into oblivion. They rebuild delicately, using small tools to suggest a petal line, a curve, a ridge that catches sunlight. It's the lotus again, returning through another door, pond to market to wall to careful fingers. You think of the lotus leaves stacked beside still water, and you realize the city's beauty is held together by the same principle: layering, repetition, steadiness. The most striking thing is how quiet the work is. Even when metal meets plaster, the sounds are small. A scrape, a brush, a soft thud of a basin being set down. The world doesn't need volume to change. It just needs enough attention applied consistently, over time, by people who show up. You glance up at the Buddha face again, stucco smile warmed by a shifting strip of sun, and for a moment you see the whole place as a series of small rescues. Sweeping leaves before they rot into slickness, carrying water before the jar runs dry, repairing cracks before rain enters. None of it is heroic. All of it is devotion with a practical spine. And as you step back onto the path, leaving the workers to their slow, precise mending, you carry a new kind of calm, the kind that doesn't pretend nothing breaks, but trusts that careful hands and patient time can keep things whole enough to matter. The sky changes its mind without consulting you. One moment it's bright enough to make the stucco glow, the next it's dimming, light pulled thinner, shadows widening like someone has quietly lowered the blinds. You feel it before you see it, a thickening in the air, that charged dampness that makes your skin tighten and your hair decide to frizz out of spite. Leaves lift and tremble as the breeze shifts direction. Birds go quieter, as if they've already read the forecast and don't feel like arguing with it. And then the first drops arrive, fat and spaced out, like the rain is testing your seriousness. A single drop lands on a brick edge and darkens it instantly. Another hits a lotus leaf with a soft thud, bouncing and rolling away as if the leaf refuses to be bothered. A few more follow. The sound becomes a scattered tapping, stone, leaf, water, each surface answering differently. You take a few steps along the path, thinking you have time. That is the classic pre-rain delusion. Within seconds the tapping multiplies, and the air turns cooler in a rush, like the whole world just exhaled. Rain thickens into sheets. The ruins blur slightly at the edges. The pond's surface, which had been calm enough to hold crisp reflections, turns into a hammer texture, thousands of tiny impacts, each one sending up a quick silver splash. It's beautiful, obviously. It's also inconvenient, because you are still a person with a body and a tendency to slip. The brick causeways that felt steady a moment ago become slick in patches where moss has been waiting for its moment. Your shoes pick up a film of wet grit. You adjust your stride automatically, shorter steps, more careful placement, weight centered. The bucket lesson returns like an old friend who never lets you forget, slow down or spill. Rain hits lotus leaves and runs off in clean beads. Those leaves, waxy and stubborn, barely get wet. It's rude. You, however, become wet immediately. Water slides down your neck. Your shirt clings in the least flattering way possible. Your hair gives up. People appear with a calm competence that makes you feel like a rookie. A caretaker moves along the path with a folded cloth over their head, feet steady, eyes scanning for trouble. Someone else is already shifting offerings, collecting anything that could be soaked, moving it to higher ground. There is no panic, just action. Like rain is a known guest that always shows up unannounced and must be accommodated politely. You follow their lead, because you've learned that pretending you know better is a waste of everyone's time. Near a small shrine platform, a few offerings sit too close to the edge: flowers, incense, a candle that has no chance in this wind. The rain is angled now, driven by gusts. Water splashes up from the bricks, threatening to soak the leaf wrapping and scatter it. You step in, crouch, and start moving things inward, closer to the wall, under the slight shelter of a roofline or stone lip. Your hands work quickly but carefully. A lotus bud is cool and slippery in your palm, petals tight, weighty with pond water. You lift it, set it down again on a drier patch. Incense sticks are light and fragile, and you pinch them gently so they don't snap. The candle is already sputtering. You cup your hand around it, but the wind laughs and the flame gives up anyway. You don't feel guilty. Fire and rain have their own negotiations, and you are not in that meeting. The rain intensifies, and you look up and see it, the way the park transforms. Ponds become darker, more reflective, not because they're calm, but because their surface is now a constant moving shimmer. Ruins turn deeper in color as bricks drink water. Stucco grows slightly glossy in places, like skin after a bath. Leaves drip steadily, each drop gathering, swelling, then letting go. The air smells sharper, cleaner, rinsed. You head toward a sheltered area, an overhang, a pavilion, anything that will keep you from becoming a fully portable puddle. The walk there is delicate. The path is more dangerous now, not because it's dramatic, but because it's quietly treacherous. A thin layer of moss becomes a slip hazard. A shallow puddle hides a dip in the brick. You plant your feet like you're learning to walk again, and the slow pace feels oddly comforting. You don't have to be fast. You only have to be steady. A gust pushes rain sideways, and for a moment the whole world tilts into a blur of water. Palm fronds lash. Lotus leaves flex and bounce back, stubborn as ever. Your vision narrows, not from fear, but from sensory overload. The sound of rain on leaves, rain on water, rain on brick, rain on your own body, all layered into a steady roar that smooths your thoughts into one long, simple line. Under shelter, you shake water from your hands and watch the scene from a safer angle. People gather quietly, caretakers, locals, a few other visitors, each one just existing, waiting for the weather to finish being dramatic. Someone wipes a surface, repositions a bowl, checks that offerings haven't floated away. It's the same pattern you've seen all day, small corrections, steady care. And in the middle of this rain-lashed landscape, you notice something that makes you breathe a little deeper. The Buddha faces, those stucco smiles, look different now. In the rain, their calm feels less like an ideal and more like a practical skill. The smile isn't about pretending storms don't happen. It's about not letting the storm rewrite who you are. The rain will pass. It always does. For now, you stand under shelter, listening to the steady roar, watching water reshape the park into mirrors and moving silver. You feel the world rinse itself clean, and, quietly, you let it rinse you too. You stay under the shelter a little longer, because the rain has turned the park into a low lullaby, and leaving would feel like interrupting at mid-note. The roofline above you catches the water and releases it in steady curtains. Droplets gather, swell, and fall in clean, repeating beats, tap, 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 like someone is counting down your thoughts until they finally stop fidgeting. From here, the ruins look softer. Brick darkens into rich brown-red, edges blurred by wet sheen. Stucco turns slightly glossy where rain kisses it, and matte where the overhang protects it. The lotus ponds, earlier so still they held the sky like glass, now carry a restless shimmer, thousands of tiny dimples rising and collapsing, reflections chopped into moving fragments. Same place as dawn, just rinsed and closer. A gust slides through and the rain tilts sideways again. You instinctively draw your hands closer to your chest, like posture can protect warmth. The people near you don't flinch. They tuck a corner of leaf wrapping inward, shift a basket, and return to stillness. The calm isn't performative. It's practiced, like sweeping paths or pressing plaster into a crack, small actions done early, so the world doesn't have to break loudly. You edge toward a shrine platform that sits just inside the sheltered line. It's simple, a low base, a small image set back in shade, offerings arranged neatly where wind can't scatter them. You recognize the pattern, flowers, incense, a bowl set with care, only now everything looks freshly washed, colors deepened by moisture. A lotus bud rests among the offerings, petals tight and cool, as if it has borrowed weight from the pond. Rain hammers the open space beyond the shrine, but under the roof the air feels close and calm. The scent is damp brick, wet leaves, faint incense, and that mineral chalkiness from stucco and lime. It's clean in the way rain can be clean, scrubbing the air, thinning the dust. The sound changes when you stand nearer the shrine. Out in the open, rain is loud. Under shelter, it becomes layered, roof drip rhythm, leaf drip rhythm, pond splash shimmer, and a steady background roar that smooths it all into one soft blanket. Your shoulders sink, says, "Fine, I'll stop." Somewhere deeper in the temple grounds, a bell breathes again, faint, muffled by rain and trees, but present. The note rises and fades as if it's exhaling through wet air. You remember the first time you heard it in the forest, when it pulled you forward without insisting, and you realize the bell is doing the same thing now, not calling you to hurry, just reminding you the day still has a spine, even when the sky is pouring. Water runs along the bricks near your feet, finding seams, slipping into tiny channels, then pooling in shallow depressions. The city's old water logic shows itself in miniature. Even puddles behave with intention, guided by slopes you wouldn't notice when everything is dry. A caretaker passes with a cloth and wipes a ledge where spray has reached in. Another shifts a bowl a few centimeters deeper into shelter. It looks trivial, until a gust throws mist inward and you see how the offering stays dry. Small corrections, steady care. The same pattern everywhere you've been today. Your eyes drift back to the Buddha image near the shrine. The face is smaller than the grand stucco smiles you studied earlier, but the expression holds that same quiet curve of the mouth, that same heavy-lidded calm. Only now the rain changes what you receive from it. In sunlight, the smile felt like something sculpted. In rain, it feels like something earned. Water makes everything more truthful. Brick shows pores. Stucco shows hairline cracks. Leaves show veins. Even you show your edges. Damp sleeves, softened patience, temporary surrender. And the Buddha's expression, unchanged in material, seems to offer a different lesson in this wet light. Not, everything is peaceful, because clearly it's pouring sideways out there. More like, Everything passes, so stop clenching. You think of your earlier pride, the moment the forest forgot you and your twig and leaf markers became a joke. You think of the bucket, how water punished haste with cold splashes and rewarded steadiness with calm. You think of sticky rice, insisting you slow down enough to taste it properly. Rain is the same teacher, just louder. It forces you into the present. It turns rushing into slipping, and slipping into humility. A small problem tries to form, when nudging a lotus bud near the edge, threatening to roll it toward the drip line. You step forward and move it back with 2 fingers, careful not to bruise it. Tiny action, but it feels right. You're not controlling the storm. You're just keeping one small thing where it can remain intact. As the rain keeps falling, the park breathes in a new way. Trees glisten. Ponds churn. Ruins darken, then brighten when the clouds thin and let a little light through. In that shifting glow, the Buddha's smile seems to soften further, not because it changes, but because you do. And under that roofline, with water counting down your thoughts in clean, steady drops, you realize this is also part of Sukhothai's beauty, not the postcard calm, but the wet, practical calm that keeps going anyway, even when the sky forgets to be polite. The rain doesn't end so much as it loosens its grip. What was a steady sheet becomes a softer spill, then a scattered tapping, then the occasional drop that falls late, like it forgot to leave with the others. Air turns lighter. Birds test their voices again. The ruins keep their darker, rinsed color for a while, as if they're enjoying being freshly washed. You step out from under the shelter when the ground feels honest enough to hold you. Brick is still slick in places, so your feet keep that careful, shorter stride, steady, quiet, unshowy. Puddles sit in shallow dips like small mirrors left behind. Lotus leaves are beaded and glossy, each leaf holding water for a second and then refusing it, letting it slide away in clean pearls. The day has moved forward while you've been listening. Light is softer now, angled lower, turning everything into long shadows and warm edges. You wander back along the maintained paths, past a few familiar shapes, brick bases, a broken stair, a platform where stucco was mended in quiet precision earlier. Workers have covered their materials. Tools sit tucked under eaves. Fresh plaster patches have that faint, slightly lighter tone that will darken with time until it belongs. And then you notice the forest again, not as a place that loses you, but as a corridor that changes personality when the sun begins to sink. The canopy holds onto light differently late in the day. Shade thickens early under trees. Even with clear sky returning, the forest pockets start to look like they're already rehearsing for night. You feel it in your body before you name it, the smallest rise of caution. Not fear, nothing dramatic, but the practical awareness that these paths, which were gentle and readable in morning, can become quietly confusing after dusk. The bell is faint now, as if it has exhaled most of the day and is saving breath. Cicadas warm up again in the background, turning the air into a soft electric shimmer. A coolness creeps back in where damp earth still holds rain. You follow a route you recognize, the forest walkway leading toward a temple stretch where lanterns usually wait. You don't know this because you've read a guide. You know it because you've been watching the day's rhythm, offerings placed, paths swept, candles sheltered, and lanterns are simply the next part of that rhythm, the part that prepares the world for the moment the light slips away. The walkway appears ahead like a calm line through trees. Posts rise at intervals, simple and sturdy. Along them, small hooks and brackets sit ready, places where lanterns can hang, evenly spaced, creating a gentle chain of light that turns darkness into something navigable instead of dramatic. Except, the brackets are bare. At first you assume you're early. Lanterns might be brought out later. Someone might still be gathering them. You keep walking, eyes moving from post to post, expecting to spot a stack of lanterns under an overhang or in a sheltered nook. But the emptiness keeps repeating. Hook after hook. Bracket after bracket. Nothing swaying. No paper shades. No glass chimneys. No bamboo frames. Just rain-darkened wood and the faint shine of damp metal. You reach a small storage corner near a sheltered platform, an area that looks like it's meant for the day's practical items. A broom resting neatly, a bucket placed where it won't trip anyone, a low bench, and a wooden crate that should, by logic, hold the lanterns. The crate is open. Inside, there's packing straw and one lonely strap of cloth, like a belt someone forgot. No lanterns. No spare wicks. No oil containers. No small tools for trimming and lighting. The box isn't messy, it's simply emptied. Your first instinct is to blame yourself. Maybe you're looking at the wrong crate. Maybe there's another storage spot. Maybe lanterns aren't used here the way you assume. Your brain tries to smooth the problem into a misunderstanding, because misunderstandings are easy. Problems require you to do something. Then you notice the caretaker's movement. It changes. Subtly, but unmistakably, like a song's shifting key. A person walks the line of posts, pausing at each bracket, fingers lifting once, twice, as if checking a presence that isn't there. Another caretaker glances toward the storage area, then toward the path leading deeper into the trees, then back again. Their steps become slightly quicker, not rushed, but purposeful. A novice passes with folded cloth, then slows near the empty crate, head tipping downward in that quiet, assessing way you've started to recognize. No one speaks. No one flails. But the air tightens a fraction. The same way your ribs tightened when the forest forgot you, only now it's shared. A small, practical concern blooming into the space. Night is coming, and the forest doesn't care about your optimism. You glance up through the canopy. The sky beyond the leaves is still pale, but it's draining of color. The light is slipping away in stages, first from the understory, then from the mid-level branches, then finally from the highest leaves. Soon the forest path will be mostly shadow, and shadows, as you've learned, can make two familiar trails look identical. Lanterns aren't decoration here. They're a safety net. They guide the slow evening walk. They keep offerings visible. They prevent the slick brick edges from turning into a quiet hazard. They mark the human line through trees, the way the brick causeways mark the line between water and water. You feel a small, almost ridiculous thought rise. You didn't survive all day's calm lessons just to end up wandering in the dark again. The forest would find that hilarious. A caretaker touches the empty crate's rim, then withdraws their hand, as if the absence itself feels wrong to the fingertips. Another scans the ground near the storage area, checking for dropped items, wicks, matches, anything. Nothing. The rain has rinsed the earth clean. If lanterns were here earlier, they didn't simply fall and hide. They were taken. For a moment, you imagine a harmless reason, Lanterns move somewhere drier during the storm, stored under deeper shelter, relocated temporarily. That's possible. But the caretaker's focused scanning suggests they don't know where they went, and that's the part that matters. Dusk thickens, and the forest begins to hold its breath again. You don't step into the middle of the caretaker's movements. You don't invent a grand solution. You simply offer your attention, because attention is what this place has been teaching you all day. You trace the line of posts back with your eyes. You notice the direction of footprints in damp earth, faint, interrupted by rain, but still there in patches. You look for signs of hurried carrying, a dragged mark, a scuffed leaf pile, a wet stain where something rested. The lantern brackets remain empty, repeating the same quiet statement, something is missing. And as the last clean light slides lower beyond the trees, you feel the problem settle into its true shape, small, practical, resolvable, but not optional. Night in this forest is not a cute aesthetic. It's a reality that arrives on schedule whether you're ready or not, and it would very much like you to respect it. You don't let the missing lanterns turn into a story about doom. You've watched how this place handles problems, quietly, early, with hands that make small corrections before anything has to become dramatic. So you borrow that style. You stand under the damp canopy, let your breath slow, and you begin the search the way you learned to carry water, steady enough that nothing sloshes, not even your thoughts. Dusk thickens first beneath the trees. The upper canopy still holds a pale wash of sky, but down here the light is already thinning into green-gray. The empty brackets along the walkway look more serious now. You trace them with your eyes, post, hook, gap, until repetition becomes a clue. If something is missing this evenly, it was taken evenly. That means hands, not wind, not accident. The caretakers move with contained focus. No flailing, no frantic running, just purposeful walking that makes it clear the lanterns will be found. You match them without stepping into their way. Your gaze drops to the ground where rain has left dampness that preserves prints for a short, honest window. Footprints appear and vanish like half-remembered dreams. Rain has softened their edges, but direction still shows itself in places. Heels pointing away from the posts, a toe scuff where someone pivoted, a shallow groove where something heavy was set down and lifted again. You follow those faint signs the way you followed the bell earlier, not chasing, just letting them confirm you're not wandering in circles. At the storage corner, you kneel beside the empty crate and look for what survives storms. Straw is pushed to one side, as if a stack of lanterns once pressed it down. Along the inside rim, a thin dark smear clings to the wood, oil, faintly sweet and metallic. You bring your hand close and smell it. Small, but unmistakable, lamp oil and old smoke, the quiet perfume of evenings that usually goes smoothly. Oil doesn't vanish the way rainwater does. It stains. You skin the brick seams near the crate and find 2 tiny spots, then another farther along, like breadcrumbs dropped by someone who didn't realize they were scattering a map. Your earlier twig and leaf system would be offended by how effective this is. You follow the dots. The walkway bends and trees close in. A shrine niche appears, the small punctuation mark you were taught to notice earlier, and you take it as a checkpoint. You've been here. You remember the air in this pocket, the way incense clings to it even after rain. Memory steadies you. This isn't the forest forgetting you. This is you reading it back. The bell's breath returns faintly, suggesting you've drifted off the temple's center. That feels right. During the storm, lanterns would be moved to deeper shelter, less spray, less wind. You start looking for practical spaces, covered corridors, low buildings tucked into trees, anywhere with a roofline that catches water and refuses it. A narrow side path opens, maintained, swept, edged with bricks kept visible by someone who cares. You step onto it and feel the difference immediately. Firmer ground, a subtle straightness in how it leads. The forest isn't offering you infinite choices this time. It's guiding you toward work. As you move, the air shifts again. Damp leaves, yes, but now also that mineral scent of lime and plaster, like the repair area you watched earlier. You pass a low platform where fresh stucco patches still look slightly brighter. Beside it, a scuff mark cuts through the damp grit, a dragged line, the kind left by something awkward and bulky. Lantern stacks are exactly that, fragile, unwieldy, insisting on two careful hands and a slow pace. Under a roofed corridor, late drops fall from the eaves. Tap, tap, like the building is still counting your breaths. Then scent arrives, clearer now, oil, damp paper, the faint dusty sweetness of bamboo. Your body recognizes lantern. Before your eyes do, the way you recognize sticky rice by steam before you saw the basket. You slow even more. Behind stacked baskets, half hidden in shadow, shapes repeat, curved frames pressed together, paper shades touching, the dull shine of metal hooks. The lanterns are here, gathered in a careful pile under deeper shelter, protected from the storm like a sleeping flock. Someone moved them, just not back yet. Maybe the rain came fast. Maybe another task interrupted. Maybe everyone assumed someone else would return them. One of those ordinary misunderstandings that can quietly steal an evening if nobody notices in time. You let your eyes travel methodically, lanterns, then the likely path back to the bracket line, then the corner where the working parts should be. Because finding lantern bodies without their wicks and oil is the kind of joke the universe likes to tell right before nightfall. A small tin container sits to the side, tucked under cloth. A bundle of spare wicks rests beside it. Practical. Complete. Your shoulders drop, because this isn't a mystery. It's simply a misplaced evening. You finally reach out and rest your fingertips on the nearest lantern frame. It's cool, slightly damp from the air, and solid under your touch. Real. Found, but not yet restored to its place in the world. You inhale slowly, tasting bamboo and oil, and you feel that familiar calm settle in again. The same calm you felt when the bucket stopped sloshing, when the lotus pond steadied under your gaze, when the stucco smile taught you that weather can change without changing you. Night is still coming, but now it has a plan to follow. You don't celebrate out loud, because the forest has taught you that loudness is mostly for people who haven't learned anything yet. You just stand there a moment with your fingertips resting on bamboo frame, feeling the cool dampness, the slight give of paper, the practical weight of something that belongs to evening. The caretakers arrive in the corridor's shadowed pocket with that same contained focus you've seen all day. No panic, no fuss, just a quiet tightening of purpose as their eyes land on the stacked lanterns and the neatly tucked tin of oil. The whole scene shifts from missing to moving, and you're folded into it the way you were folded into sweeping and carrying water. By proximity, by rhythm, by the simple understanding that you have hands and you can be useful. You lift a lantern carefully. It's lighter than you expected and more awkward than it looks. Bamboo ribs pressing gently against your palm, paper shade wanting to crease if you grip too hard. Rain has left the air damp, so everything feels slightly softer, slightly more fragile. You take a breath and adjust your hold, remembering how Lotus bruises when you rush it, how sticky rice demands you commit to the pace, how water sloshes if you try to walk like you're late for something important. You are not late. You are simply here. The lantern line begins to move. One by one, the frames are carried out from deeper shelter toward the walkway posts. The forest around you is dimming in layers, first the ground, then the trunks, then the lower branches, while the sky above the canopy still holds a faint, thinning glow. Cicadas raise their volume as if evening is their cue to start the chorus. Wet leaves shine in the last light, each one holding a glossy edge. Drops still fall from eaves now and then, late and lazy, tapping like a slow metronome. At the first bracket, a caretaker reaches up and hooks a lantern in place with practiced gentleness. The motion is precise. Lift, align, settle. The lantern hangs and sways once, then steadies. You hang yours nearby, careful not to jostle the paper shade. It takes a second to find the hook by feel, because darkness is creeping in and the bracket hides in shadow, but your fingers manage. The lantern catches a faint hint of sky and looks like a small, pale seed waiting to sprout light. Oil comes next. Someone uncaps the tin and a familiar scent rises, warm, metallic, faintly sweet with smoke memory. A wick is threaded into place. Fingers pinch, adjust, trim. Everything is done with the calm of people who have repeated this task enough times that it has become part of the day's breathing. Then the real test arrives, politely. The air is damp. The wicks are slightly moist from humidity and near storm air. The first attempt to light one doesn't take immediately, the flame wavering like it's reconsidering its life choices. You cup your hand around it, the way you tried to protect that candle during the rain, but this time the wind is less arrogant. The flame catches, hesitates, then holds. A soft, warm glow blooms inside the shade and steadies into something that feels like relief made visible. One lantern becomes two. Two becomes four. Light begins to punctuate the walkway, dot by dot, turning the forest corridor from shadowy and suspicious into readable and kind. The posts recede into the trees, and each one now carries a small pocket of warmth. Shadows don't disappear, they soften. They stop being a wall and become texture. As more lanterns ignite, the wet world changes color. Brick edges pick up amber highlights. Lotus leaves near the path catch warm reflections and gleam like lacquered bowls. Tree trunks, dark with rain, take on a gentle gradient, black-brown in the deepest shade, copper where lantern light reaches, then green-gray again where the forest resumes control. You notice how your body responds before your thoughts do. Your shoulders drop. Your jaw loosens. The tiny tightness that formed when you saw empty brackets unwinds as if it has finally received permission. It's not that danger was imminent, it's that uncertainty is heavy. Light doesn't just help you see the path, it gives your nervous system a place to rest. The last lantern in the first stretch is lit, and the walkway transforms into a quiet ribbon of glowing beads. The caretakers begin the evening walk along it, checking that hooks are secure, that flames are steady, that shades aren't brushing branches. You follow, naturally, because the line of light is now the most persuasive thing in your world. Your feet find the path with ease. Places that felt slick after the storm are now visible. Dark moss patches that would love to surprise you, shallow dips where puddles linger, roots that rise like knuckles across the edge of earth. You step around them without drama, guided by warm pools of light that fall in gentle circles. The bucket lesson returns yet again, not as scolding, but as harmony. Move slowly, keep everything calm, let the surface settle. The forest, lit this way, feels almost tender. Lantern light doesn't flood, it caresses. It makes the air look thicker, as if the warmth has weight. Insects drift through the glow like slow sparks, harmless and sleepy. Leaves hang motionless, relieved the storm has passed. Somewhere deeper, a bell breathes again, faint, muffled, steady, as if it approves of this small restoration. You glance down and catch your own shadow stretched across the bricks, softer at the edges than it was in daylight. It doesn't look like something chasing you. It looks like something following. You remember how your reflection broke into ripples on the Lotus pond and reformed, and you feel the same sensation now. You can fragment a little and still remain yourself. As the lanterns continue down the path, the whole walk becomes a quiet ritual. Not theatrical, not formal, just steady human care in the face of natural darkness. Hooks hold. Flames breathe. Light repeats at intervals like reassurance. The forest is still the forest, still vast and unconcerned, but now it has agreed, briefly, to share the night with you in a gentler tone. By the time you reach the far end of the lit stretch, dusk has fully settled. The sky above the canopy has turned to a deeper blue, and the world beyond the lantern line is a soft, unreadable mass. Yet within the ribbon of light, everything feels navigable. The missing lantern problem has dissolved into this warm, continuous glow, and you feel a strange, quiet pride, not the loud kind, not the conquering kind, just the kind that comes from participating in care. You keep walking with the others, slow and steady, letting the lanterns lead you forward as if the night itself has finally stopped trying to trick you. You keep walking with the others, slow and steady, letting the lanterns lead you, patient, repetitive, almost stubbornly kind. The forest outside the ribbon of glow stays dark and vast, but inside each circle of warmth the world becomes readable again. Brick seams, damp moss, a root lifting like a knuckle, a leaf flattened by rain. The caretakers do their final checks the way they do everything here, quietly, early, with hands that make small corrections before anything has to become a bigger problem. A shade is nudged away from a branch. A wick is trimmed so the flame stays clean. A hook is tested with a gentle lift. Nothing is hurried. Night comes whether you rush or not, so the only sensible rebellion is calm. When they are satisfied, the group's motion loosens. People drift back toward the temple structures, toward storage corners, toward the routines that fold the day away. You follow without needing to be directed, because you've been following all day. Bell breath, broom whisper, bucket slosh, the patient pressure of plaster into a crack. Your body has learned a new language, and it's mostly made of pace. The trees thin, and you smell water again, cool, green, slightly sweet. Lotus. The pond waits at the edge of the ruins like a calm page you can return to whenever your thoughts start scribbling too fast. Under night, the Lotus pond is a different creature. The surface is mostly still now, the storm's earlier hammering reduced to quiet ripples whenever a late drop falls from a leaf. Lantern light doesn't flood the water, it schemes it, leaving warm reflections and broken lines, like gold threads stitched into dark cloth and then deliberately kept understated. Lotus leaves sit in layered silence, glossy edges catching faint highlights. A few blooms stay open, pale shapes holding their softness in the dark. You step to the brick edge and feel warmth lingering in it. Brick that spent the day absorbing sun, now releasing it slowly, like a held breath finally allowed to leave. Nearby, locals share the space without crowding you. Someone sets a small tray under shelter where offerings rest protected from wind. Everything is arranged with that familiar care. A leaf folded neatly, a bowl set so it won't tip, a lotus bud placed upright as if balance itself is a kind of respect. You realize the day is ending where it began. Water holding light, lotus holding stillness, ruins holding time. And you, stubbornly, holding on to calm like it might finally belong to you. A figure steps close enough to place something on the brick near your hand. No flourish, no insistence. A lotus bud closed tight, cool to the touch when you lift it. Its weight surprises you again, the way the bucket surprised you with slosh and gravity. You turn the bud once in your fingers and feel how easily it could bruise if you squeeze. The lotus refuses roughness. It demands a gentle grip. Of course it does. You hold it like a small promise. Not a souvenir to prove you were here, but a reminder of the day's steady lessons. Move slowly, keep your hands soft, make small corrections before problems grow teeth. Your mind tries to translate that into a full, new you plan, because your mind loves paperwork. You let the urge pass. Tonight, calm doesn't need a strategy. It needs space. A fish breaks the surface and sinks again, leaving a single ring that widens and disappears. Somewhere deeper in the trees, the bell breathes once more, distant, muffled, like the temple exhaling the last of the day. The sound folds around you and fades, leaving the night to do its own slow work. The farewell arrives without anyone needing to announce it. The locals begin to drift away in practical arcs, toward paths that lead home, toward dinner, toward sleep. Their departure isn't abrupt. It's the same calm unspooling you watched between errands at the market shrines, devotion and daily life braided together without knots. You stay at the lotus edge a little longer, because leaving a place like this feels like waking up mid-dream. Across the pond, ruins become silhouettes. Lotus leaves become soft shapes. The water becomes a deep plain holding scattered light. And you notice, gently, that your nervous system is quieter than it was this morning. The tightness behind your ribs has softened. Your shoulders sit lower. Your breathing is slower, longer. You didn't fix your life in a day. Nobody does. But you learn to stop stirring your mind every second, and that is not nothing. You start back along the path, lotus bud cradled carefully. The lanterns behind you keep glowing at intervals, steady and warm. Your shoes find the brick edges without drama, stepping around slick moss the way you learned after the rain. Even the forest feels less like a trickster and more like a quiet room that simply prefers you move with respect. As you pass a stucco smile again, half lit by lantern spill, the expression looks exactly as it did and completely different. In this dim warmth, it feels less like stone and more like a skill. Remain soft while weather passes through. At the last bend, you glance back once at the lotus pond. The water holds a final thread of lantern light, trembling and then steadying. You hold the lotus bud closer to your chest and let the goodbye land where it needs to, quiet, warm, and not demanding anything from you except that you remember how to breathe. You carry the lotus bud for a while, until you realize you've been holding it like a fragile thought you're afraid to drop. The petals stay closed, cool and compact, and the bud keeps reminding your fingers to stay gentle. Eventually you set it, carefully, on a dry patch of brick beside the pond, upright and steady, like it belongs to the place more than it belongs to your pocket. You've learned something here about leaving things where they make sense. Night has settled fully now. The air is clean after the rain, cooler on your skin, and the park feels both emptier and more alive. Lanterns dot the forest path behind you in warm intervals, each one breathing a small, patient glow. Beyond their light, the trees are a deep, soft mass, not threatening exactly, just vast and uninterested in your drama. Inside the lantern ribbon, the world stays readable. Brick seams, damp moss, a late droplet falling from a leaf with a tiny, decisive tap. You take one last circuit, not to see everything, because that impulse can go nap in the corner, but to feel the continuity you've been walking through. The causeways between ponds are darker and rinsed, shining in places like polished wood. Lotus leaves hold stillness in stacked layers. A few blooms remain open, pale against the dark water. Lantern reflections stitch trembling threads across the surface, steadying and breaking and steadying again, exactly like your mind has done all day. The ruins look different at night. In daylight, brick reads as warm and obvious. In lantern spill, it becomes sculptural, edges softened, gaps deepened, silhouettes sharpened. A broken stair becomes pure geometry. A platform becomes a quiet stage with no performers. Even empty space feels designed, as if the city learned long ago that absence can be arranged beautifully. You drift back toward the stucco smiles, because of course you do. Those faces have watched you move between water, forest, market, and rain like a tired pinball. Under night they're harder to see at first, pale surfaces dim in the green-black shade. Then you step into a lantern pool and the face appears, cheek, eyelid, curve of the mouth, lit in warm gradients that make the expression feel less like an object and more like a presence. You let your eyes do what they've learned, read texture, not perfection. Hairline cracks. Tiny pits from weather. A place where repair blended new plaster into old without pretending time didn't happen. The face holds all of it, and still offers that half smile, as if serenity isn't a mood but a method. Your memory walks the day in tactile flashes. Broom bristles whispering over packed earth. The buckets slosh teaching you humility with cold splashes. Sticky rice warmth insisting you slow down enough to taste it. Fingers pressing plaster into a crack, smoothing edges so repair doesn't shout. Rain turning the park into moving silver. Empty lantern brackets making dusk heavier than it needed to be. Then the lanterns, found and hung and lit, turning the forest into something navigable and kind. None of it was grand. That's the point. Sukhothai doesn't convert you with fireworks. It convinces you with repetition, small acts that accumulate into steadiness. You walk a short stretch of the lantern line again, just because you like how it feels now that it isn't missing. Light falls in circles on the path, gentle enough not to break the night's softness. Insects drift through the glow like slow sparks. Cicadas keep their electric shimmer, But it no longer feels loud. It feels like the forest breathing. Your steps land quietly, respectful without needing to perform respect. At the end of the lit stretch, the trees thin, and you can see the ponds again. Water holds the lantern reflections like stitched gold thread. Somewhere far off, the bell exhales a final note, faint, rounded, then lets it fade. You realize it has guided you the whole time without ever demanding you be worthy of it. It simply existed, steady enough to orient you when everything else blurred. You take your last look the way you've learned to do everything here, slowly. Your gaze passes from lotus water to brick to stucco to tree canopy. It rests on repaired surfaces, on swept edges, on the hooks that now hold lanterns instead of emptiness. You notice how much of this place depends on people doing the same small right things again and again, showing up, adjusting, carrying, sweeping, mending. And you notice, with a quiet surprise, that you can carry that pattern out with you. Not the ruins, obviously. Not the lotus pond, unless you've been secretly smuggling water in your sleeves. But the pace. The habit of making your next movement smaller and steadier. The willingness to do a tiny correction early. Move the fragile thing back from the edge, trim the wick, slow your step before you slip. The permission to open when light is there, and close when it isn't, without turning it into a moral crisis. You turn toward the exit and the park doesn't feel like it's pushing you out. It feels like it's releasing you, the way the roofline released rain in clean curtains, the way lotus leaves released water in beads. At the last bend, you glance back once more. Lanterns glow like patient punctuation. The stucco smile holds its calm. The lotus pond keeps its dark reflection. Everything remains where it is, steady and unhurried, as if to say, you can leave, but you don't have to lose this. You breathe in, long and cool. You breathe out, slow and soft. Then you keep walking, carrying the quiet like something warm that doesn't weigh you down. The lantern light stays behind you as you walk, but it doesn't feel like you're abandoning it. It feels like you're letting it continue its quiet work in the trees, dot by dot, while you carry the gentler part of it inside your chest. Your footsteps become softer on the bricks, and then softer still on the packed earth, until you can hear yourself moving, like you're trying not to wake the night. You picture the lotus pond one last time, the dark water holding thin threads of gold, the leaves stacked like calm, the bud resting where you left it. You picture the stucco smile in warm shadow, cracks and repairs and weather all accepted, as if the face is telling you, again, that steadiness is something you practice, not something you wait to magically feel. You picture the bucket of water that only behaved when you slowed down, and you let that lesson settle into your breathing, in and out. Now the images begin to blur in the nicest way. Brick becomes warmth. Water becomes hush. Trees become a soft silhouette. The bell's last exhale becomes a memory of sound, then a feeling, then nothing at all. Your shoulders sink. Your hands unclench. Your jaw loosens. If there's still a worry clinging to you, you don't have to fight it. You can let it sit off to the side, like a leaf on the edge of a pond, until it gets tired and drifts away on its own. Stay here for a moment, in this slow quiet. Let your eyelids grow heavier. Let your thoughts wander, but without sharp corners. Let the day fold itself up neatly, the way lanterns are stored when the rain comes, ready for tomorrow, but not demanded right now. You are safe. Rest now. End of story. Sweet dreams.